From meltdowns to cover-ups, it's never too early to look back, and it's never too late for the government to lose its mind. There were so many nuclear options in 2013. It'll take more than one show to parse the insanity that turned so many of you into independents, but we'll give it our best shot. A look back at 2013 so we can look forward tonight on The Independents. Hey there, I'm Kennedy, flanked by my men of the hour, Reason editor-in-chief, Matt Welch, and also Camille Foster from Free Think Media. You will learn to love his wardrobe. Together, we are clothed in liberty and justice. We are The Independents. One of the biggest stories of the year was Edward Snowden's NSA document grab and the revelations that our government was not only spying on its enemies and allies, but on its own citizens as well. Not everyone is as repulsed by the news as we are. Some people think the NSA is justified in its use of data mining to fight terror. Joining us now, it's Stuart Baker. He's a former NSA lawyer. Welcome to The Independent, Stuart.
Thanks a lot. I have to take issue with the idea that this is spying on Americans. They gathered the information, but they looked very carefully and very selectively at a few people who had demonstrated ties overseas to terrorists.
All right, so you're going for it right off the bat. Then let me ask you a question. Why has Edward Snowden resonated with so many people?
The first order that he put out made it look as though the government was just grabbing up all this data and looking at it at will. And he withheld, and the journalists withheld, for 2 weeks all of the limitations that the government put on itself. And that shaped the narrative from then to now. And so lots of people have real doubts about what exactly NSA did and real doubts about whether NSA can be trusted. I think that's gradually, very slowly coming back into focus. But those first stories were devastating for the agency.
Well, I'm glad you made mention of the fact that there are these checks in place. We've seen a little bit come out about the FISA court and the number of things that it actually has not rejected. It looks as though it's been a little more than a rubber stamp when actual things have come. Well, I'm not certain if it's crap. I mean, it looks like they've actually only tossed out about 0.3% of the various claims that have come before them.
You're awfully defensive,
We can at least
Stuart.
talk about why they're not rejecting more of these things. And let's not disregard what judges have said about the FISA court. FISA court judges have said about the programs, that there have been systematic and continuous abuses. I mean, what do you say to that? That is a FISA court judge talking. That's not me.
Oh, is that the rubber stamp you were talking about? Which is it? They're a rubber stamp or they're a legitimate critic of the agency?
That's a false dichotomy.
I've given you two examples. Let's talk about the continuous and systematic abuses that the FISA court
let's start with the first one.
About.
The first one, you say, oh, they only rejected 3%. In fact, they made changes in 25% of the applications that came before them. They rejected far more than any other court rejects of the requests for discovery orders that are brought before them in similar circumstances in criminal cases. They're much more aggressive in reviewing these than any other court is in reviewing any other government demands for information.
And so the systematic and continuous abuses, are those happening or not? That was a FISA court judge.
So that's the first point. Second, they do monitor for abuses, and that's why you've seen their very aggressive opinions saying, this isn't right, this is wrong, you didn't tell us the facts on that. They are actually overseeing this. Frankly, I think they're doing more of that than they should be. They've gone beyond a judicial role into a managerial role with the agency. And you know, the last time they did this, they drove the wall between law enforcement and intelligence right down into the FBI so that we couldn't catch the 9/11 hijackers. There's a lot of history here, and it is not free to say, let's have lots more oversight from the FISA court.
Senator Mike Rogers, who sits on the Intelligence Committee, said earlier this summer that there have been no invasions of privacy by the NSA. We know that's not true anymore. James Clapper said to Ron Wyden when asked if the NSA is collecting any kind of data at all on millions of Americans, he said, no, we know that's not true. At some point, when you have systematic lying to Americans about what are being done, doesn't it lose democratic legitimacy? What is the excuse for that kind of lying?
First, the agency does quite an extensive job of reporting on everything that it has done that goes beyond what the guidance it's been given calls for. And They are very careful about not intentionally targeting Americans where there's no basis for thinking that they're an ordinary citizen rather than an agent of a foreign power. There have been maybe a dozen cases where some single individual deliberately targeted somebody in violation of these rules. Most of those were non-Americans, and every one of them was caught and punished. The agency is operating within the legal rules that have been set by the courts and by Congress.
Is there any justification whatsoever for having the rulings, the legal opinions of the FISA court kept secret? Not the findings, not the facts, but the legal opinions for the theories behind their rulings kept secret. What is the justification for that?
It's very difficult to write an opinion without explaining the facts that you are relying on when you make that opinion. Law in the United States is not made in the abstract. It's made on a particular set of facts. So
an adversarial set of facts.
Yeah, but that doesn't answer the question at all.
We'll take this one at a time. You can't really explain what you're saying about the law if you don't explain the facts on which you're acting. And the facts are all classified, so that makes it difficult to release the opinions in a way that most people would understand and find useful.
Well, your mouth looks perfectly intact, although you're speaking out both sides of it, sir. But I'm glad you joined us.
I beg your pardon.
Okay, I have one last question. How do you find the balance between keeping Americans safe and keeping civil liberties intact? Last question.
So we obviously know that technology is empowering terrorists in many, many ways. It wouldn't have been possible to carry out the 9/11 attacks 25 years earlier. You wouldn't have had cell phones. You wouldn't have had ATMs. You wouldn't have had a lot of the tools that they used. Frankly, you wouldn't have been able to fly the plane. So technology empowers everybody, including the terrorists. We have to use the technology in ways that will empower the people who are trying to catch the terrorists. And so, yeah, we ought to use big data tools. We ought to use the fact that information gets cheaper all the time to screen for the people that we're most worried about. When I was at NSA in the Bush administration, that's exactly what we did. We got access to all of the incoming travelers' travel reservation, not just the suspects, everybody, so we could decide who should spend a little time in customs having their background questioned and their luggage looked at. And that was an enormously effective approach to guarding the border. You could say, oh, you're spying on everybody by gathering all their information. But the fact is, it was used simply to make a decision about who was going to get questioned a little more closely.
All right. Well, you used some terms in there that actually strike terror into me. And I'm frightened of the government hearing more and more of the explanation. Thank you very much, Sir Baker.
You guys are suffering from a kind of Obama derangement syndrome here.
That's strange.
You know, this,
is that what it is? Oh, I thought it was rationality. Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it. All right. Well, Stuart Baker, please come back again because you're smart and interesting. Do you have words?
I'm interested. Is it true that if you collect metadata on millions, tens, hundreds of millions of Americans, how is that not spying?
That looks a lot like spying to me. And
Can
the
you just
reality
explain
is,
the metadata?
I mean, given what you can actually know from metadata, you can know all about people's personal relationships. You can know where they were at a particular date and time at any point in history. It's the real issue with the metadata is it is obviously very, very, very invasive, and a number of Congress persons have spoken to that. But there's also this question of the efficiency of a program like this. I mean, you are storing
it is so inefficient. You're absolutely right.
It's incredibly expensive. It's invasive, it's inefficient.
It's a massive
and
net.
It's way too expensive.
Yeah, and you know, there's no explanation for why they needed Verizon data on every phone call received and made by
There is an explanation is bad guys are trying to kill us, and so therefore we can do anything that we want, and if you say anything about it, you're a Chicken Little. John Ashcroft went on a tour in 2003 talking about baseless hysteria of people saying that, oh, you can sort through all of records. Of course we're not sorting through records.
Right.
He was lying. President Obama was lying on Jay Leno when he said there is no spying on Americans. We see all these lies. When they're caught in their lies, that's when they're stammering.
But then it's the whole system is sort of spinning up. There's a great deal of activity, all sorts of frantic actions happening, but no one at all seems to be actually getting anything effective done.
All right.